Is this like giving her poison?
I think that it's so easy to fall into like, I better be exactly the same. And if I'm not, there's something wrong.
I love how you make believe you don't know these things. That's amazing. Lululemon. Yeah.
Right. The alternative response would be, blah, blah, blah. We've all had pain. Take a little Tylenol. You'll be fine. We'll get to the doctor when we can.
Welcome to the Learning Curve podcast, brought to you by Mishpacha magazine.
We're raising children in a changing and challenging world.
So let's tackle the important issues facing frum families today.
I'm Rabbi Garfield, Manal of Yeshiva Torah MS in Houston, and I love talking about chinuch.
I'm Rabbi Ari Schonfeld, Manal Yeshiva Katana of Manhattan, director of Camp Eish. I also love talking chinuch and sometimes fishing.
Join us as we answer your questions and discuss the topics that matter to parents the most.
Last week, we went into the foray of the camping world, some practical and exciting conversations with the always excitable Rabbi Garfield. How are you, Rabbi?
Let me tell you, that camp episode was so much fun. I somehow missed camp. I went a little when I was a kid, but I never became like that camp guy. But hearing you guys talk about it with such enthusiasm, it was great. Like I could just see how much you guys love it and live it. It's awesome. So happy for you.
I'm happy for me as well. So onward we move. So as always, Rabbi Garfield, two smaller topics, and then the large one. Today's topic is going to focus outside the classroom. We'll get there. And
my question is about sibling fighting and rivalry. When is it normal, and when do I need to intervene? I've been taking a work it out yourselves approach, but my kids are fighting more than ever. And I just want to make full disclosure, make it known that your sister, younger sister or older sister?
Younger sister, could be either. Yeah.
Your younger and older sister, your younger sister lives here in Houston and is an amazing preschool director in our early childhood department. So let's hear how you guys get along.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, and she sent in this question about her childhood. That would be my older sister, who would talk about our rivalry. Yeah, this question, this is a parent hat, not a manal hat, I think. So I'm going to speak a little bit, through the classroom lens, but obviously this is a challenge that any of us that are zeichet to have large families have this challenge. The work it out yourselves approach is, of course, the one that you wish would be the easiest. Maybe it's also the laziest, but it allows them to have growth on their own, and they figure out how to, work on relationships, even let's say they didn't go to camp, so they didn't have that experience, right? The challenge is that sometimes the power is imbalanced. So if you have a seventh grade boy and a third grade girl that are fighting, to tell them to work it out by themselves is unfair, because we know how that will work out in the end. But you have this in yeshiva when there are social challenges in yeshiva amongst kids and the Rebbe and the Mora always want the kids to work it out by themselves. I think what I find valuable and helpful and useful is to try to role play and to try to, whenever you have any really type of social dynamic that's troubling, is really to try to use empathy as a way in which to show the person the other side. I remember in camp, a lot of my stories are in camp. We once had a kid who was being really mean to the lifeguard. The lifeguard was not frum, but grew up in the frum system. And the kid was telling me, "You eat on Yom Kippur, I don't have to listen to you. You're Machal Shabbos." Really rough, right? Seventh grader. So trying to figure out how to show this kid that what you're doing is just unacceptable. So my head counselor, Rabbi Hananya Kramer, called this kid into the office, and he said, "Then we're going to role play. And let's say the lifeguard's name was Jake." And he said, "Yankel, you're Jake. Remember, you just got kicked out of school and you finally come to a frum camp, blah, blah, blah. And now tell me, get out of the pool." And he tells him to get out of the pool. And Rabbi Kramer said, "You're Machal Shabbos, Yom Kippur." And the kid started to cry.
Wow.
And we were like, whoa. And he's like, so the to me,
don't worry, his parents won't find out about it, so you don't have to worry.
It's a long time ago. Long time ago. The story happened over 10 years ago. But to me,
I mean, he can't call home and tell his parents that the head counselor made him cry.
Oh, that's what you mean. It was day camp.
You have your whole
day camp. So he went home at night. It was day camp. But my point is that the most important value that you can instill in the kids, and of course your kids are going to always fight. This is not going to stop their fighting. But the more in which you can allow your child to see the other side, to feel the other side, the better chance you have at having them realize that there's another person here.
Right. I hear that. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful strategy. I would only add that you have to appreciate siblings are fighting. I shouldn't say fighting. They're vying for such an essential thing that they both need, which is your love, attention, and resources.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really pitted up against each other. Imagine one of these great shows, The Amazing Race or something. I don't know what they're called, but like where all the people have to like vie for the same resources in order to survive, you know? So in a real way, siblings are set up like that. They're in a family with two parents and limited time, resources, energy, toys, whatever the currency is. And they have to sort of find their place in it. And it's full of emotion, of insecurity, of discomfort, of challenge. And so I just would say to a parent in that situation to like look at it with those eyes and see, where is the need for more resources for these kids? Is it focus? Is it, toys? Is it so that they don't feel the need to like, outdo the other one in order to get that?
Right. And the calming statement that I would tell parents is that if you're a healthy home, then speaking from experience as someone that grew up with a tremendous amount of sibling rivalry, and if the love is healthy and deep, it doesn't last. You fight as kids and as adults, you probably still fight, more over WhatsApp than in person, but the bonds of the siblings are obviously the most important bonds in our lives.
Yeah, it's a very healthy attitude. Stay calm.
So, Garfield, now it's your turn to sit in the hot chair.
Oh, I love it. Your questions are so good. They're so rich.
Yes. So here we go. Question number 2 goes as follows.
Dear TLC, my 3rd grade daughter loves playing games on my smartphone. At first, I let her use it when we were on airplanes or waiting in the doctor's office, but slowly I see that she is using it more and more. Is this like giving her poison? I don't think we can stop it completely, but I am not sure how to find a good balance. I feel like this should be like, I don't know, one of those, talk shows, finding balance and equilibrium in life. Well, Rabbi Garfield, we'll start you off. I read, you answer. We'll take it from there. The mother, doesn't say it's a mother, maybe it's a father, probably a mother. It's in the doctor's office. And sitting next to the kid on the airplane is probably not the father. Gaming, smartphones, balance, poison, put it all together. Wow. Go.
Wow. Listen, we can all relate to this question. If a question ever resonated with almost every parent who owns a smartphone, this question does, because in those situations, on an airplane or in a doctor's office, it's so easy to go to that pacification device to get the child to behave and agree and do what they have to do. But we don't always think about the ramifications of that, because once the child gets used to that, then it just expands and expands. And while I wish I could just come up with some very clear guideline and say, this is what you do, this is what you don't do, I think the reality is that this is a very individualized and specific kind of situation that just requires a certain amount of personal awareness. And that if a parent is aware of the challenge, that's like the first step. Because I think a lot of us, when it comes to technology, we don't even think about it. We don't even take the time to recognize the slippery slope that's happening in our families. And before we know it, things have changed dramatically. In my family, we have older kids and younger kids. And of course, the older kids look at the younger kids, say, it's not fair. They get to do so many more things than we got to do.
Right.
Because of course, we all started with much more rigid rules and everything. And as you get older, the rules get a little more lax. But the point is that I think the critical piece here is for this amazing parent who's asking the question, who's acknowledging it. Because if the parents are using smartphones to say, no kid could ever use a smartphone, it's a little disingenuous. I don't think it ultimately will be a good chinuch model to say, do what I say, not what I do. At the same time, obviously, parents have a lot more maturity and control in the way they do it than children. So I think the first step is just to be thoughtful about it, and to ask the question and try to be proactively considering what we're doing with our kids and just let it happen.
Wow, that talk about a PC political, how do I not answer a question by answering a question by Garfield.
Well, it's good you're here because you'll be able to clean it up with your answer.
I don't know if I'm going to give a direct answer. I'm going to echo, and I think we're going to echo this a lot from each other, and that is that obviously each scenario is different, and each case is different, and each family is different, and the stanzas of your community and your tzibur and your school and your shul, everything matters. That being said, I think that fundamentally, and I don't mean, of course, there are exceptions to the rule, but I'm going to go a little bit from a different angle. I don't think kids should be on their parents' phones. I'm not saying that there can't be, when you're in a doctor's office, yes, then your daughter, your son can use your phone, or if you're on a 5-hour trip from Houston to Passaic, New Jersey, but there should not be a family dynamic in which, the mother or father's phone is used by the children for anything really. I think there should be boundaries. There's privacy. There's things that are private, just between father and mother, between emails and school, everything. I don't think you need so many details. I think it's pashut. I think it's simple and obvious that a parent's phone is a parent's phone and not a child's phone. So this exact scenario, I think, is something we should really work hard on avoiding. But the fundamental issue of finding a balance when it comes to video games, that is something that, again, very much depends on the culture that you're in. In certain yeshivas and in certain cities, there'll be no electronics allowed officially. But the one thing that I want to add is culture really matters, because you have those parents that are in a city or in a yeshiva in which the standard is A, and they try to pivot and say, I'm going to be extra strict and I'm going to give you 22 minutes a week on the computer, on screen time, right? Right, you're smiling because we know of those people. And invariably, not always, it backfires. It becomes ma'im genuvim, right? It becomes something so enticing, and it's something that all I want is those 22 minutes. And oy vavay, if you go away to a wedding and the babysitter doesn't know all the rules, then I'm on it the whole night. So you have to start from where your family is situated, hashkafically, culturally, socially, and you have to be normal in what you allow your kids and having rules, and you have to control the narrative, not them. That would be my non-answer.
Okay, let's do a third question, which is as follows. My daughter is a great kid and a classic mainstream Beis Yaakov. Lately, she has been coming home begging us for the latest and newest gadgets and clothes. This new stress on Gashmias is something that we as a family do not believe in. However, her response is always, but everyone else has it. I hope I did that well as a little girl. And the sad part is that it seems she may be right. How do we balance our family ideals without having her feel like a nerd and left out from the rest of the class?
Yeah, so this is someone that has, an 11-year-old daughter, soon to be bas mitzvah, and three teenage wonderful yeshiva bachrim. I hope that the stress on Gashmias is not something that we as a family believe in, but this is, to me, the first thing I think is that this is the most standard battle and struggle that you will have, assuming that you are a strong, foundationally sound, Torah Dika home. Teenagers care about their outward appearance. And the first thing I would tell those parents is there is nothing more normal and expected that whether it's a Beis Yaakov girl or yeshiva bacher, they are going to care about their outward appearance a lot more than you want them to. You go to the best yeshivas and the best mesiftas, and the boys are all dressed to the T, whether it's their Lululemon, sweaters or pants, and their chups, their haircuts are very important to them. And these are great kids. And I think part of it is just normal, and you have to just expect it and accept it, that your 7th grader, boy or girl, is going to care about their clothing a lot more than you want them to. And that is just normal. I once told a parent that I want my kids to care about their clothing. I was an 8th grade Rebbe. I want them to care about their sneakers because I want them to care, period. I want them to have aspirations and to really care about how they present themselves and what people think of them. And my job and our job as educators and mechanchim is to channel that in the proper way. But I want them to care. I want them to care and strive for excellence. So fundamentally, I think that the standard, desire for that young, budding adolescent teenager to want to dress well is healthy and normal. and you're just going to have to put it on the credit card bill a little more. I don't mean to be so harsh, but that's fundamentally. The however is, I want to play both sides a little bit, is if you really feel that this is against the family standards, and we have things that they don't have, and they have things that we don't have, and we have standards, and we have expectations. And the thing is, though, that's something that can't start when they're 13. You can't wake up that we have standards and they're 13, all of a sudden they want to buy that expensive charms, I hope I'm saying it right, on the bracelet. It starts when they're kids. If there's pride in who they are and who you are as a family, then they will respect your sometimes difficult decisions as a parent.
I hear you. I think that's one of the advantages of living out of town. And, just put that out there, that there's a little less materialism. And because of the diversity of the different people in the school and the different people in the community.
Educate us. Why does that lead to a lack of materialism? And how can we bring that east?
I think it really has to do with groupthink, meaning when you're in a homogeneous group, the more homogeneous it is, the more you want to conform to it. So especially in the New York area, let's say, or Lakewood, where there's so many niche groups that are so homogeneous, I think that it's so easy to fall into I better be exactly the same. And if I'm not, there's something wrong. But if you go out of town, we're in the same school. You have such diversity of hashkafa, of background. You have Gerim, Baal Tshuva, Yeshivish, Koil, all mixed together. There's this sense that it's okay to be a little different. You don't feel that same pressure to be the same as everybody else. And therefore, the people who find their own lane, it's socially acceptable. So I think that's where that dynamic is. I don't know how to change that. I think there's a disadvantage to that, is that in your own lane, you can't push as hard. So in the schools in New York,
can I cut you off? Rabbi Garfield, can I share a story about your yeshiva that proves this point?
Please, by all means.
It was one of the funniest stories in which Rabbi Garfield and I are part of this big Menahel group that we meet once a month that Rabbi Garfield, of course, facilitates. And somehow there was a boy that had a smartphone or had long hair. I think it was long hair, right? Can we say the story?
Yeah.
Okay. So there was a boy that had very long hair.
Manal who said that
I know, yes.
School. Oh.
Right. There was a Manal who was struggling what to do with a kid that had very long hair in his school, and he didn't want to get a haircut. And Rabbi Garfield left, we were all on Zoom, and Rabbi Garfield left the screen and came back a minute later with a kid that had hair down to his waist. And he introduced him to the crowd, say hello to Yankee. I was like, hi, Yankee. And that to me wasn't the funniest part. The funniest part was that one of the principals was trying to make small talk and made such an assumption. And he said, hey, Yankee, how you doing? It was right before the Super Bowl. Is that good? No, who are you going for? The Chiefs or the 49ers? And Yankee's like, I'm not a sports fan. And it was so, because that cookie cutter mentality is that kid must be struggling. He must be a huge sports fan and not following all the rules in yeshiva. And he's in Houston. I don't know anything about that boy. I'm assuming he's wonderful. And no, he didn't follow sports just because he had long hair. I thought it was...
Right, exactly. That's a great example. So in the same school, you could have a kid with such diverse, backgrounds and financial situations, like everything. I did want to say that there is a disadvantage to it. It's not all peaches and roses, because when you're in a lane, you could really accentuate the values of that lane in a much stronger way. When you're sharing the lane with 4 or 5 different groups, you're not able to then accentuate the particular values of one particular group in the same way. So that's why some of the schools that have these niche missions, like their mission is specific to a certain ideology or a certain educational focus, they could do more in that than I can, because I have to be available to a much wider group. So it's not all fun, but at least when it comes to this, there is an advantage. I think we owe the listener an answer. Do we buy them I don't know what the latest and greatest is, the Lululemon?
I love how you make believe you don't know these things. That's amazing. Lululemon. Yeah.
Do we buy the Lululemon bag, or do we not? And I'll take a stab first, because I know how much you love to paint me into a corner. I would say we try to, but on a limited basis, meaning assuming that you can't expect a child to be, and this is sort of what you were getting at, I believe, like an outsider. Like if you live in a certain place, you got to understand that you live there. Even if you don't want to live there, maybe move. But it's so long that you live in a place, a child wants to be normal. Does that mean they have to be in the top? No, but they shouldn't be the pathetic kid either. And I think you have to find that balance. And with a very, as you said, with a very heavy heart or whatever the credit card, you just have to get them a little, some, because other than that, if you don't do that, you're asking too much of a child, I think.
One of the best ways in which a parent's not best ways, one of the most potent answers or approaches for a parent is attack the assumption. But everyone has it. Really? Who?
Right.
Tell me 4 kids in your class that have it.
Yeah.
Right? Or something like that. And very often, one or two things will happen. Either not everyone has it, no one has it, one kid has it, or you'll be able to, and you have to do this very carefully without being judgmental, show that there are different groups, and we're not part of that group that has it. And that's what I meant when I said, you can't just show up now and have the conversation. Your child has to believe to the core that if you say that, by the way, we're not part of, group X, we're part of group Y, you better be part of group Y. So, the parent who actually sent in this email is a friend of mine who's passionate about this, about his daughter is in a great Yeshiva Beis Yaakov, his daughter's in a great Beis Yaakov, and yet this is a challenge. So these are all nuances. And as you said, the reality is, if you live in a in-town yeshiva, you are signing up for a certain level of gashmius indulgence in the teenage years. And now we move to our email spotlight of the night, in which we try to do on every podcast is to take one topic, one email, and unpack it and really try to dive into it for, the time allotted and bring on a guest to discuss it, professional, and to really try and see if we can get a little deeper on that topic. And so today, I'm going to read, Rabbi Garfield, the following email that was sent by a parent, actually not from a parent, it was sent by a Rebbe. So you see, our listeners are very diverse and very broad. This Rebbe doesn't say whether he's from the tri-state area or not. They don't know. But here we go. So, Rabbi Garfield, the way it works is I'm going to read you the email. I guess you'll maybe begin saying your thoughts, and then we'll introduce Dr. Shafer to have a hopefully very lively and energetic conversation. So, dear TLC, as a Rebbe who has been involved in chinuch for close to 25 years, I've noticed a troubling trend over the past few years. Every kid is in therapy for something else. ADD, ODD, anxiety. We have a diagnosis for everything and a therapist to help and solve every issue. At the same time, the current generation of kids just don't have the resilience and grit needed to succeed in class and life. Every 80 on a Chumash test is a crisis. Every fire drill needs 3 emails as emotional prep to the parents. Is therapy always the answer, or is it destroying our youth? Your thoughts. Your thoughts are my words to you, Rabbi Garfield. So this is obviously a very, very big, it's a hot topic in the secular world. There's a book out, I think she's Jewish, but I don't know, by Abigail Schreier called Bad Therapy, that Elon Musk tweeted out or X'd out and said that everyone must read, and on this topic. And Rabbi Garfield, I'm going to let you lead as we try to unpack, obviously, a sensitive, a fundamental and important Yesodistic topic and challenge in chinuch today.
I recently came across a chazal that says that Torah is different than every type of medicine, because every type of medicine, although it helps area A, it could cause difficulty in area B. But Torah, it helps area A and it doesn't affect anyone negatively. And when I think about therapy, or any intervention for that matter, whether it be medicinal, medicine, therapy, any type of physical activity, it always has that risk of having a negative impact. It's like when I grew up, there was someone who was really into jogging, and he was like so healthy and energetic, and he jogged. And Nebuch, he had an accident when he was jogging, and that really destroyed him. So you say, is jogging healthy or not healthy? Well, it's often healthy, but it does have an element of danger. And so to say that therapy is never negative or cannot cause any negative impact, I think is naive. But that doesn't mean that we throw out the proverbial baby with the bathwater.
Can I cut you off? I seem to be doing a little bit more because I think anyone listening to this is going to get very, very upset at, what do you mean? A kid has abuse, shouldn't be in therapy. Could we delineate and separate the two types of therapies? Meaning this conversation, this email is obviously not for a kid that underwent extreme trauma. We're not discussing chas v'sholom, a girl who's anorexic, or someone that has real extreme outside the norms behaviors. I think no one's arguing with that. That's not, I don't want to make that controversial, chas v'sholom, right? So I'm turning right back to you. But when we discuss therapy, that's why this Rebbe is saying that therapy is even for the normal kid. Everyone's in therapy today.
Okay, so that's fine. But even therapy that's intervening for abuse or for serious things could mess up. That's the nature of intervention. It's not the Torah. and it could have negative impact. That's just the nature of it. They're
But
bad
so could
actors.
surgery. But so could surgery. Not gonna
Exactly.
someone
So that's
not-
why
not
I just
have
want to
surgery,
caution.
right?
Exactly. That's why I would be scared. I didn't read this book, but I could understand the sentiment that there are going to be examples from across society of bad therapy, of therapy gone wrong. And, that's something that's just the reality of, and I wouldn't use that to set the tone. I would definitely say that there are definitions of what is considered an issue that needs intervention. And generally, I served as a school counselor for 6 years. I have a background in counseling. And so the general criteria of when you refer a child to therapy is when they're not able to function in a normative and healthy way.
So maybe that's the question. Have we changed the definition today? Maybe has the pendulum swung too much that the definition of normative, normal, and healthy way is that barometer has dropped below normative and healthy ways?
So, of course, I can only speak from my experience, and I can't speak for, other communities and other places, but I could say in my experience, I have not seen that. In my experience, therapy is generally only suggested or utilized. It costs money. It's an inconvenience. It's not easy. So it's generally only used when there's a significant dysfunction, and the dysfunction is so significant that it requires this intervention. Now, I don't know, again, it's hard to, we're not addressing that book per se.
No.
But I do think that I think that there's a naive understanding of what therapy is and isn't, comes from a lot of different places. And we have to be careful because the community has come very far in the last 20 years in appreciating that therapy does have a place. I think that those who are more skeptical of the secular world and certainly of the soft sciences like psychology, initially it was something that was very taboo. And I think it's great, broadly speaking, that in our community, it's become so normative and so accepted. And a lot of people who need help are getting help when maybe 15, 20 years ago they wouldn't. And I just want to caution us and this Rebbe from trying to put a kibosh on that, because in my experience, the large majority of kids who are getting therapy or adults, it's because there's a dysfunction that needs to be addressed. And Baruch Hashem, we've seen a lot of progress in this area. So I don't
want to ask you to discuss all the boys and girls in Houston, and I won't discuss all the boys and girls in Yeshivish Manhattan. I am a camp director as well, so I think I have a pretty wide range of exposure. So I'll ask it to you. Do you feel that today's kids are missing, obviously we're stereotyping, are missing grit, resilience, or don't know what it means or struggle when they fail a test, when they're not picked on a team? And obviously the outside world has an effect on us. I'm afraid that there is that sentiment that kids are weaker in their ability to fend for themselves. Now, we used to call it, there was the soccer mom, the helicopter mom, and someone told me recently there's a new type of mom called the snowplow mom, in which you come through at all costs. I don't care if I'm going to, through my, snow, I don't know if you know what snow is in Houston. It's this white little, the snowplow makes everyone else's driveways could be destroyed as long as I can get my way through. And I think that is a challenge that we have as a yeshiva system, as a chinuch society today, that as parents, maybe it's easier. Maybe we're afraid, chas v'shalom, what if I don't get my kid to therapy and then they're going to need it, and then I'm going to have them paying for their therapy when they're adult?
What does that have to do with therapy? I mean, I understand that you can have a parent who's overly protective and aggressive, but why does that put a question mark on therapy? That's like a separate issue.
No, so that's really, because if you expose a kid as opposed to allowing him to struggle through without...
I mean, I'm saying therapy should trigger only when there is a struggle that's so great that he or she is not able to deal with it on his own. Now, true, I agree that the world is less resilient. I think it has a lot to do with our parenting, but I would say that the whole world, it's not only parents, the more easy life is, broadly,
right,
the less resilient we are.
Right.
Like if you stop wearing shoes and walk around for 3 weeks without shoes, your feet will become resilient and you'll be able to not feel pain when you walk around.
Right.
It's like that with every aspect of life. So yes, because of all the comforts that we've developed, the air conditioning and the washing machines and the dishwashers and the internet and everything in our world has become easier. As human beings, we are less resilient. And that's true about parents and that's true about kids. And the expectation on us, let's say as principals, to produce environments that are so
So you're giving
aligned
in,
with the needs of the children has become so much greater. But that's a function of the world we live in society. I don't think that's a function of therapy.
It is, because when you take a kid who's a little anxious and you send him to therapy, and then he learns, all his triggers, and all of a sudden he starts just noticing things that either weren't there or weren't really important or shouldn't really matter to him. And he builds this entire world through his therapist of triggers and anxiety and safe spaces and things that he needs and things that he doesn't need, as opposed to struggling through 6 tough weeks in 3rd grade.
What would those 3rd grade weeks look like? If the kid was functioning, fine. But was he functioning? Was he getting up and going to school? Was he not going to school? Was he crying all night in his bed? Was he not eating? Was he self-harming?
So that's what we started out with, and maybe this.
I'm saying it depends on the significance. If say a little anxiety, I would agree. A little anxiety, fine. The question is, if it's getting in the way of his ability to function, and by going to someone, he could talk about it, understand it, develop some intervention techniques. Listen, again,
on this, right? Because we're doing
anecdotally, I have found that it helps kids significantly. And I want to make one more point that's much broader than Houston and much broader than Yeshiva Manhattan and even broader than Aish, which is Torah Masorah, the umbrella organization for many of the schools that we represent. I believe that they have, 250, 300,000 children under them, have taken a great interest in this and developed their Mashkiach and Mechanechas training program. And in that, they train with the highest level from therapists. They train mechanchim in the schools, understanding anxiety, understanding OCD, understanding depression at the highest secular level. That not to provide therapy, but to be aware of it, to be able to make referrals, to be sensitive to it. So clearly the Rosh Hashivas of Torah Masorah and the organization that is representing all these schools does feel that there is a valid case to be made to be sensitive to mental health needs and to invest in awareness and education to get our children the help they need.
Agreed 100%.
So we agree that therapy is an important piece of the menu that we have as schools. We should use it thoughtfully, especially making sure that it's only used when children are not functioning the way they should, and not use it irresponsibly. But I haven't found it being used irresponsibly. So I don't know where this Rebbe's a Rebbe, but in my experience, I've not found it being used inappropriately. And I think it's provided the world and our children a tremendous opportunity for support. Could it be overused? Yes. Are there bad therapists sometimes? Yes. But to say that children are not resilient because they're getting help when they're in pain, I think that's just an uneducated perspective. I don't see how you could say that, not to put any pressure on you having it on your position. It's an honor for the Learning Curve to welcome Dr. Yossi Shafer, who is a clinical psychologist and director of Empower Health Center, which is a group practice of multi-specialty therapists in Lakewood, New Jersey. You're involved with therapy for children, for couples, for adults, for group, doing all sorts of great work. And you have extensive training and doing all sorts of stuff and research. It's great to have you, Dr. Shafer. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Really a pleasure. And, knowing the little I got of the two of you, and especially of Schonfeld for all the years on Night Seder USA, it's a real opportunity and appreciate it all.
If you're going to give me a plug, you better say it right. It's Night Seder America. I was introduced by one of the heads of Meridian Capital at a big Sheva Brachas, and he introduced me as the person who ran Night Seder across America. And I got up and I thanked the head of Meridian City for those warm words.
The nations came pouring in, but thank you. Yes, but it's a real opportunity. Thank you.
Okay.
So, Dr. Shafer, I think you're the perfect person for us to have this conversation because we're discussing, is therapy being overused and what are possible negative impact of therapy in our community? And I think that we're sort of torn because there's two things happening, and I want to hear your thoughts. On one hand, we are more aware of therapy. We're more aware of mental health challenges. Our community is much more sensitive to these issues in terms of the training that we do for Rebbeim, et cetera. But on the other hand, we're finding that our children are less resilient. And that's this dichotomy that sort of was pointed out by the book Bad Therapy, where there's this sort of add correlation or causation, it's a question, going on between more and more mental health, more and more therapy, and less strong families and children. So as someone who's mamish in that, who's providing therapy in the community and seeing its impact, what is your reaction to hearing that kind of question? Is therapy hurting us more than it's helping us?
Okay, great question. And I think I don't know in any way we want to go here. And I heard you mention the book about therapy. From the little that I've heard and read, just the Hakdama, and I would love to, one day maybe we should have some sort of a dialogue with, this assumption that therapists almost have their own philosophy. Almost like I would love to ask, and if I may ask both of you, I hope it's not too blunt. People say therapy. I should send my kid to therapy. I shouldn't. I could be on the phone 2 to 3 times a day with a Rebbe or Rosh Hashiva, a medical professional. Does my kid need therapy? And it's almost like, what does anyone at all know what is therapy? I'd love to ask any audience, even this Bad Therapy book. She said she interviewed, hundreds of psychologists. I wonder, she didn't interview Aaron T. Beck from the Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Institute, Marshall Linehan. Does anyone have it? Can I ask the both of you if it is okay on this platform, does anyone have a clear, definitive answer of what is therapy?
I think that the definition of therapy, or the understanding of therapy that we have today, is a way in which a professional or someone in a safe environment, in a safe setting, allows someone to understand better their self, their challenges, and to work through those challenges in a way that maybe in the past was considered voodoo and considered, if you have such a challenge, that means that we ostracize you. And all of a sudden now, therapy is really a way for me to better understand myself, which hopefully leads to growth in Avodas Hashem. That's my novice principle.
If that's the definitive, great, and yes, that's very clear. But meaning, if that's the clear, definitive definition, would anyone at all have any issue with it? Would it be taboo? Would it be stigmatized? Or it's like almost like a deep, intense Mussar Seder, which most Rabbanim today would call it that, where you're just literally going into yourself without any denial, defenses, and just being objective. But I don't think anyone would deny that, right? So then back to the question, what is the whole conversation about therapy? Go ahead, Rabbi Grylak. Yes.
I do think that people would push back, and I'm not saying that I would agree or not, but just to bring out the point, is that some issues are better left unaddressed. Some issues, let the child sort of grow through. Yeah, so let the child sort of grow through it instead of highlighting it and talking about it. You're almost making it worse. Just an example that's from a different field, but let's say a child has a toothache, right? So they come to you and they say, Mommy, Daddy, my tooth hurts. So the one reaction will be, oh my gosh, let's get you into the doctor. And that night, that child is going to think about nothing but their tooth. They won't be able to sleep. They won't be able to, brush their teeth. They won't be able to eat. They'll be so focused on that pain. The alternative response would be, blah, blah, blah. We've all had pain. Take a little Tylenol. You'll be fine. We'll get to the doctor when we can. And likely, theoretically, the child would be able to deal with it much better. And maybe you'll go to the dentist at some point. But the parent won't have magnified the challenge by talking about it and focusing it and giving it names and looking up. And so when it comes to mental health, one could make the same argument that if a child experiences some anxiety, some worry, maybe some depression, so there's 2 reactions. Either we could say, oh my gosh, you're depressed. That's it. We're calling the doctor. And all of a sudden the kid thinks something's wrong and he goes to the doctor. He gets paid essentially to maintain this relationship and magnify the necessity. And he meets mom and dad. He says, oh, I think I can help your kid, but I don't know. It's going to be hard. Child goes home and falls apart because now they're depressed and the doctor said they're depressed. And the alternative would be to say to the child, yeah, I felt that way once. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. And it's true, there's some danger in that. But as an initial response, it would build resilience. The kid would see that he's going to make it. And the Shalom Al Yisrael.
I appreciate the way you said it. And probably the first few minutes of every therapy session, we have a group practice of about 20 psychologists, social workers here in Lakewood. It's a private practice, something that if you would have told someone 10, 20 years ago that would be existent, they would have thought we're nuts. And people did tell me that, very good. You work in a basement and you have separate entrances. We have 300 to 400 clients coming in the hub of Lakewood. It could be politicians, Rosh Hashivas, obviously Talmidim, although probably almost every Mesivta, Yeshiva Katana, within the Tri-State.
I don't mean to cut you off, Dr. Shafer. That's what I do when I say I don't mean to cut you off. But you have Rebbeim, I'll use the word Rebbeim leaders, public figures, and that stigma does not exist in Lakewood for them to walk in, knock on a door in a waiting room and wait for you?
Okay, so you hit the waiting room. I will say many would be, there are some, it's always going to go. There are some they're going to walk right in. They're going to open up the Gemara, sit, do the daf in the waiting room. Some of them are going to wait in the car. But as Rabbi Babat from Relief, just wrote in an article, maybe the word's not stigmas as much as it is, a private matter. People are not going to tell their friend, I was just sitting by my foot doctor because I have mushroom fungus growing out of my toes, even though it's not stigma, but I'm not telling my Chavrusa second Seder. Some people would, some people wouldn't. I think some people today, it's like, yeah, I had panic attacks. I got past it. Some people, I don't know why, my marriage, I just wanted to get it to a better place. My kid was, just didn't have friends. We brought him to a therapist and, he's doing well or whatever it is. It's Yeshivish. People that are coming to us, typically, especially in the frum community, are coming after months and months of not knowing how to calm their child down or school refusal, doesn't want to get to school. Unfortunately, we get to school 3-4 months in. We get the call 3-4 months in. What's the average time nationally that someone, by the time they recognize an issue that they're struggling with, mental health related, from the time they recognize it until they actually seek out help? Do you know how long that time period is? Secular national statistics? Want to take a guess?
6 months.
Okay. Rabbi Schonfeld?
It's probably more than that. It's probably a year.
Okay. So national statistics, 11 years. That means in the secular population.
The price is right. I would quote them.
Right.
I remember that. No, let's not date ourselves. But, going back to that, meaning we're talking in the secular world 11 years, a comma when we're talking about the frum community, halavai, and we hope it's not going to sit 20 years, but it's not just a phone call, oh, my bubble is depressed. And many times, and this is where we get straight to the answer. Therapy today is not somewhere where there's so many myths. And obviously we make children go against their parents. We make kids go off the derech. And it's funny because we hear all of it. And it's like, we don't even know what they're talking about. Like, where does it come from? When we get a kid that's getting a referral from a Rebbe, in first grade, second grade, third, they didn't know what to do. They tried OT, PT. They worked with the parents. They went through, all the books of parenting. But my kid still just burst out crying, or he comes home and he's just throwing everything over. We just don't know what to do. So that's typically the response, that no one's coming to therapy because someone just said I'm sad at all. And if obviously there are those parents that, because of their own, obviously stories or their own experiences, and we'll tell them very clearly, no, this is something you just leave. And almost probably the phone calls that I get, probably 75% is not getting them into a therapist. It's more resources and giving them just a basic psychoeducation.
So I know you're not in the classroom, so you're not inside the walls of the yeshiva and the Beis Yaakov. So do you reject the premise, or maybe you don't have a professional opinion on this, that kids today, I know we're being very stereotypical, are less resilient and have less grit to doing poorly on a test, to being left off of the camp basketball team than they had in 25 years ago?
And I'm hoping that you'll have a future podcast with someone else just to I'm going to go one direction. I hope halavai, maybe, actually, I hope not, but I wonder if there's going to be a response the other way. But I'm going to ask both of you, Rabbi Garfield and Rabbi Schonfeld, is Klal Yisrael as a whole, forget about mental health and suicide and addictions, is Klal Yisrael as a whole doing 1% better than it was 20 years ago, 20, or are we literally, the Masiftas are booming? The yeshivas are, my son in 9th grade now in a local Masifta everyone is finishing the Masechta, Bava Metzia. In my day, I mean, if we, I don't know, our days, right? People were maybe finishing it, in Beis Medrash already. They're in yeshiva way more hours than we were. English, I speak for Lakewood, is almost perhaps non-existent, and they're learning within those times. So overall, are kids being less resilient, or I don't know, yeshivas are being built constantly. Mental health professionals within everything it's being addressed. If you want to go statistics in the frum community, almost everything has decreased from 20 years ago. So I don't know. I hear
everything decreased, meaning what? Suicide and anxiety and OCD? What do you mean everything has decreased?
So typically, to an extent, let's just go, I know, and everyone likes the word trauma and abuse and things like that. It is so less frequent. And, when you speak Talmudim, even from all the education and resources that have been out there, if you're talking general abuse, it's been down 10%, probably in the 10, 20 years. Anxiety, depression. I don't want to go with suicide. It's very hard to get those numbers because we'll never really know, what's accidental, suicide, drug over, But are the general population, Reb Elephant, we once, from the Mir in Eretz Yisrael, we invited him to come speak to our staff. We try to get Rabbanim to come every so often to the staff, just as a chizik, hashkafa, halacha questions as it pertains to mental health. He said, I'm just letting you guys know, Klal Yisrael's doing great. Just because you're seeing over and over pathology, as a whole, they're doing great. People are, the kolim, people are very much not just breaking apart. I think in the many years ago, we didn't know what postpartum depression was. We didn't know what postpartum anxiety was. Getting back to therapy for a moment, people assume therapy is your kid's not feeling okay, self-confidence. So many of the calls that I get from people that want to become therapists, they say, it usually goes like this. I've been a Rebbe or a Mechanech for many years, and Bachram love talking to me, and they love opening up to me. And I figured, I spend so much time, why not get paid for it? And I obviously, I'm going to encourage them. And we all come sort of from that background, but I sort of say to them, if you think being a psychologist is giving someone, it's a science. I mean, it's anything but that. Sigmund Freud, the founder of therapy, it's nothing to do with physics and should parents be nice. It's all about pathology, clinical depression, OCD, PTSD. You're talking panic attacks that come out of nowhere. You're talking about a typical question could be, as I'm a father of many kids, I have a wonderful wife, family, finances are great. I'm depressed. I don't know why. I have racing thoughts. I don't know how to get them out of my brain. And it's just there, meaning this is not something, and the Rebbeim are sending the referrals. Or Matthew Solomon Zitzal was the one saying, I can help you go see a professional. There was someone that couldn't get on an airplane. The guy had hundreds of millions of dollars. He had multiple businesses. He lost $26 million, a bunch of years ago, about 5-6 years ago, because he couldn't get on an airplane. Now, this guy would bet all his money, just like I think anyone here would, that the plane leaving Newark right now is going to land safely, Orlando, right? It's probably 100 times more likely to walk out of your room or office, wherever you are, in Chas v'Shalom, get hit by a car than, die in an airplane crash. But this guy couldn't get on, and he had no clue why, and he lost a business deal for $26 million. This is not something where, the guy couldn't do it. Psychologists just across the board is about pathology. It's not about making people feel good and making people feel good about themselves and don't worry, you'll do okay. But obviously that does come up, and obviously there's a lot of ways it can be misinterpreted, but go ahead. We'll take it in any direction.
I've never heard someone say that the mental state of Klal Yisrael is in a better place today than it was before. I'm happy to hear that. It's not overwhelming to hear that, but it's surprising. And I specifically push back because I recently heard Dr. Rose Marin, who runs the Center for Anxiety, has clinics all over, and he very much said something very different. And I don't want to get into a data war because we all know that would never end, but is anxiety different than the other mental health issues? And would you say specifically about anxiety that the rates have gone down in the last 10 years?
Excellent. Okay, first of all, if we're talking about David Rosemarin, who I highly respect, if it's a data war, he won without me even coming to the table. He is Mr. Data. So anything he says, everything I'm telling you, and I probably should have prefaced, is not data driven and it is not evidence based. I'm not going to, tell it. And obviously, if I'm quoting Dr. Rosemarin right, anxiety is probably the most prevalent within the Frum community. And I would imagine, and it's a good question, and I was, typically when you run data, multiple variables, anxiety, if you look at anxiety alone, it could very well be that we're higher versus depression, bipolar, things like that, much more people are getting treatment for. And probably anxiety, depending obviously where you live as well, I would imagine there could be an increase, even though I would just say, and I think Dr. Rosemarin just came out with another research, is that people that have actually got treatment for anxiety tend to do better. I think they were doing a study with the pandemic that you would imagine that a pandemic would throw people overboard that had pre-existing anxiety. He said if they actually did the CBT work before, even if a pandemic came, they scored less than general population. So if it's data about anxiety, but I would imagine that anxiety, if anything, did increase only because I'm going to speak for the community that we live in, finances and, keeping up with the Jones. And it's almost like if the shidduch, and I would imagine that is getting worse than it has nowadays. We were probably more okay with being content or, being okay with the miyat, right? The samach b'chalkai. So yes, but if you're hitting anxiety, but I would say overall, and please maybe have Dr. Rosemarin and ask him, overall mental health, is it in a better direction for Klal Yisrael? I think so.
So again, when you're talking about satisfaction of life and happiness and normal living, I'm not talking about people who are diagnosed with bipolar, which maybe is down, or people who have been abused, which I'm so happy to hear is perhaps down, but just happiness in life when anxiety is something that's growing. And again, anxiety, as you know, is a spectrum type of thing. It's not like, people have levels of it. It's hard for me to hear that our lives are much more comfortable when people are feeling so much more anxiety due to the factors you just said. I would say the general situation in life ain't so simple. And broadly speaking, people generally, I would think, would not respond to a survey that they're happier today than they were 20 years ago. In fact, I think it's harder to be happy today than it was 20 years ago for a frum person, for any person.
I just want to make one or 2 points, and then, maybe we'll wrap this up soon. First of all, you mentioned, and you quoted the elephant, about how Klal Yisrael is doing so amazing today, how much better we are than 20 years ago. Just parenthetically, this is a big topic, hashkafically, that you have with Yeshiva Bachrim, with people in general, about the balance or the concept of Yeridas Hadaris, which is a big word used in the last hundreds of years. It does not, to the best of my knowledge, appear in the Kisvei Rambam, but that notion, which in a way almost automatically creates the narrative that we are worse off today because it's Yeridas Hadaris. When you spoke to a very different world, and I think we all, wherever you grew up, and me and Rabbi Garfield are both principals, both Menalim, and we both wouldn't trade, and I had some amazing Rebbeim, but overall, we would not trade today's chinuch for the chinuch and me 30 years ago, and Garfield 35 years ago, for anything. The chinuch today is infinitely better in every way, shape, or form. And so that's just a shaila for the Rav to deal with on the Shabbos Gadol Drasha, and how did that work with Yeridas Hadaris, or if it doesn't, right? But I just wanted to make that point to what you said about today being so much better. But I want to just, if we can, go back to where we started and maybe give you the last word, Dr. Shafer. And that is, I'm going to read you a little bit of the letter that we got, which really started this conversation from a Rebbe. What would you say to this Rebbe? When the Rebbe says, I've been involved in chinuch for 25 years. I've noticed a troubling trend. Every kid today has ADD, ODD, anxiety. He's a therapist, every issue. And at the same time, every 80 on a Chumash test is a crisis. And every fire drill needs 3 emails from the school to prep the kids for emotional distress. Is therapy always the answer, or is it destroying our youth? So we give you, Dr. Shafer, the final word to Rabbi so-and-so who lives in Timbuktu.
Okay. I'm going to say it obviously just if I would see this letter, or this person would...
You can't say it depends. Now to say it depends.
Oh, okay. You know what? I'm going to say what I said before. From a business level, halavai, everyone's running and saying ADD, ODA, right? Therapy. But if you hear the letter, and I don't want to sound like, the publishers in the magazines, based on your letter, but notice the black and white, all or nothing, way of speech. Every kid and everyone has ADD, and everyone, it's just hearing that letter, I hope it's an exaggeration, as much as it may be a joke. And some people do say this. I think it's important that people do know it's not like that. No Rebbeim are saying everything is ADD, and not every therapist is saying it. It's funny. It's almost the opposite. So I really, it's sort of like what people think goes on in, Uman, and everyone has this. And like when you speak to the people that are actually there, it's like, what are we talking about? And I'd love to ask this Rebbe, where did he get those words from? Like, parent is sending 30 emails that my kid gets 78. I don't even look at it. And maybe I'm a therapist. I don't hear that. No one's calling me, oh my gosh, my kid didn't get a 90. It's a funny thing. It's like we joke about it, but it's the letter that it may be a joke, but it's so far from reality. So I don't even know what to tell the Rebbe other than what are we referring to? Meaning, is everything the answer therapy? Halavai? It's like, I don't know who said it.
Is that your answer? Is your answer halavai? Is your answer halavai?
Yes. Just to say, we wish we would be out of business, obviously, and we don't want pain ever. But meaning, if people, to be fair, I know where, people are coming from, is that, at the end of the day, if it was treatable, not in a clinical setting, typically when someone comes to us and they say, why should I trust you? You're not Das Torah, and, you're not a Rav. And I say, you're right. So how did you get here? And then it's like, oh, well, I'm struggling. I spoke to my Rav and he didn't know. Okay, so let's start over, right? No one's coming here, running to a therapist and spending who knows what because of, this letter. I don't know who it was that said that, I think I heard the name. I'll leave it out for now. But, someone said that he likes reading the Goyish papers. He doesn't like reading the newspapers. He said, whenever I read the Jewish newspapers, I always see the Yidden are so poor. There's so much sorrows. There's so much this. When he reads the Goyish papers, he starts reading the Yidden run all the banks. They're so wealthy. They control everything. It's almost like it depends how you look at it. I don't think, and Baruch Hashem today with the yeshivas, I don't know one Rav or one Menal that doesn't collaborate so well with therapists and trying to make what's best. And we'll push them out of therapy if we feel that they're just coming here. And like you said, we're going to throw them. Therapy is not a fun place. For some it is. Some people, we have people that chopper in twice a week. Why am I not firing this person? Why am I not building my business? They love it. But for some, it's a painful place. It's sort of asking questions that they probably never went to. And as a result, that's why they're having, some clinical issue. So is it a yes or no? Is everyone going to therapy? No, that's your answer. Absolutely not. Very, very small percentage.
Excellent. Well, thank you. This is a wonderful conversation. You really touched on a lot of really important topics, and I'm sure those listening are better off for it. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you once again for the opportunity, and it's such a pleasure getting to speak to the both of you, Rabbi Garfield, Rabbi Schonfeld. Thank you, Mishpacha, for doing what you're doing here. And if this can bring any more clarity towards mental health in the community, and this can be the start of, an open dialogue of the community's concerns, I'd be glad to be a part of it. And thank you again for having me on.
So that was a very wonderful conversation we had with Dr. Shafer. I just want to follow up, Rabbi Garfield, with just pointing out what I still feel to be the truth, and that I don't know is at odds with what Dr. Shafer said, or maybe slightly just from a different vantage point. And that is, we have a generation today of children that my, educated opinion and my professional opinion is, I'm going to use a very generic word, softer, and needs to be coddled more, and does not necessarily have the resilience to deal with failure on the football field, in the Beis Medrash. And maybe it's not because we're being over-therapied. I know it's not a word, but maybe it's because as a society that we're so comfortable. Obviously, in the big picture, we have more money and more access to shuls and yeshivas and camps and everything that they didn't have in the poverty-stricken Europe and the years before. That maybe that itself creates a certain lack of resilience. And maybe there's a combination of factors that force us as parents to really take stock and to avoid falling into that trap of allowing our kids to not have the backbone and the fundamental strength to really make it in life.
Absolutely. But why is this book resonating so strongly with parents? I think it really is. When we hear it, it resonates. When we hear the basic premise of bad therapy, over therapy, it definitely resonates. I think when we broke it down, we're not really seeing it, at least in our communities, as a therapy issue per se. But as you pointed out, this softness is definitely an issue. And the parenting style where we're very quick to jump in and sort of protect our children. And hopefully those listening to this podcast will take a moment to reflect on that and say to ourselves, we have to be thoughtful, like every aspect of parenting, about when we intervene, how often we intervene, how strongly we intervene, and to allow children to experience some of those challenges and not be so quick to protect them from everything. Forgetting the therapy piece, but just taking the essential message that we have to build resilience in our kids by letting them experience failure, letting them own their own problems a little more, letting them deal with the challenges that they have in school, social, academic, otherwise, a little bit, not to the point of breaking them, God forbid, but letting them sort of figure it out or encouraging them to figure it out. And with that, we could build some resilience. And I don't think Dr. Shafer would have a problem with that at all.
Right. I sure hope not.
Well, this was a great time, as always, spending with you, Rabbi Schonfeld, and spending with our community, the Learning Curve. We're so excited to give out our number, as we always do, and our email, as we always do, because as Rabbi Schonfeld always says, we really enjoy the communication that we have and the letters that we're getting and the excitement that's being built, or the emails that we're getting. So I'd like to just give out the numbers once more. Our call-in number is 443-686-9339. That's 443-686-9339. And that's a call-in number. You could ask some questions. We even could take some of the audio, hopefully play that at some point. We also have an email, which is thelearningcurve@mishpacha.com, the learning curve, one word, @mishpacha.com. And we look forward to hearing from all of you, your thoughts about this episode and other kind of questions you might have that we could feature right here on The Learning Curve. Thank you all. Thank you, Rabbi Schonfeld, once again. All the best. Thank you for joining us on the Learning Curve podcast.
Find more on this and other topics at mishpacha.com.